Dianne, good to see you. There was significant speculation that the state of disaster would be dropped completely today. Why didn't that happen?
Good evening, Felicity. Well, it was actually quite an interesting development because we had heard about the changes, through the Command Council meetings. Various members of the Command Council had alluded to the fact that there was likely to be a change. However, the disaster regulations government decided could not be just removed without replacing them with something. And the president today announced that there's an intention to announce some new regulations, but that fall within the Department of Health's domain. Now, the disaster legislation is sort of special legislation that is not supposed to be used indefinitely. I would imagine that this COVID-19 period is probably the longest period that the disaster legislation has been used. It's usually used for things like flooding, drought conditions, and natural disasters that have taken place. And for the first time, we saw it being used for a medical emergency, a global medical emergency. And of course, now South Africa's numbers have been quite low. That is number of cases as well as number of deaths that we've seen as a result of COVID-19. And many have argued that we are no longer in a state of disaster. So of course, that would lead the government to actually looking at the current provisions. However, they have said that it will take a little bit of time to get the new legislation or the new regulations out. The president indicated that the regulations will be released shortly and that comment will be allowed up until the 16th of April, which is next month.
But there were some significant changes, right? Especially to gathering. How have things changed in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. This has been one of the big bones of contention, particularly for the sporting community, who feel that sporting gatherings have been severely impacted. In terms of gatherings, what is allowed now is that, of course, as you mentioned, the number of people at funerals has increased, and venues are allowed to have up to 50% of what they would ordinarily carry. So, for example, if it is a stadium that has 40,000 seater, it would be allowed to have 20,000 people as long as the participants or the people who are attending are vaccinated, or they would have to produce a COVID-19 test, negative test that is less than 3 days old. This also applies to inside entertainment venues, not necessarily applicable to restaurants, but more applicable to musical events and concerts and that kind of thing.
All right, just hold on. Before we continue, let's take a look at the speech today by the president.
The pandemic has changed the way we work, the way we travel, the way we worship and socialize, the way we play and watch sport. It has shattered many livelihoods and devastated our economy, leading to the closure of many businesses and the loss of some 2 million jobs. Yet it has also shown South Africans to be a caring and compassionate people, coming to each other's assistance at the hour of the greatest need. When we were called upon to observe restrictions on movement, gatherings, and various activities, as South Africans, we did so, knowing that it is for the sake of our health and lives and the good of the country. Over the past 2 years, we have taken unprecedented actions to strengthen our health system. We hired more people to deal with the pandemic, built more hospital and laboratory capacity, and ensured that COVID patients are well cared for in our
That was a somber-looking Cyril Ramaphosa, isn't it?
I suspect perhaps that he's tired. South Africa has quite a lot going on here on a regular basis, and we are preparing for an investment conference taking place later this week. But perhaps also the president is tired with these announcements. It's been 2 years of different lockdown level announcements, 2 years of these kinds of restrictions. And many South Africans are quite frustrated with the situation that we're living in.
I mean, but for sports fans, the story might be different. They are likely to be delighted by the change to gathering. You did mention that earlier. Does this mean that fans will finally be allowed into stadiums?
Absolutely. I think that there will be a bit more of detailed announcement in the week, but essentially it does open the doors of stadiums to fans. A lot of sporting fans have been very frustrated with the fact that the PSL in particular hasn't been allowing fans. We've seen some cricketing events that had a very few fans, but only about 2,000 in stadiums that can take many, many more. The rugby season is also coming up, and there has been speculation that by the time that the rugby season begins, that there would actually be fans allowed. So now we will see most of our major events having sporting fans attending. Fans were so frustrated, but that they actually marched recently to complain over this issue, saying that it was unfair that people could go to malls, people could attend restaurants, but that fans who are in open air areas were not actually allowed. So this will definitely be a relief for sporting fans in South Africa.
Let's talk about the coincidence with the religious calendar in South Africa. These changes are coming quite close to it. Is there any significance here?
Yes, absolutely. In South Africa, the Easter period and the period leading into the Eid period is quite a significant period of travel, first of all, for families. But of course, there are some major events, that take place. There are a number of massive Easter services that usually take place here, particularly in Limpopo, where people travel from across the country to actually attend the ZCC church. Now, those services had been put on hold during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will be interesting to see whether now that these new provisions have come into play, whether these Easter services will take place. Similarly, for the Muslim community, after the fasting period, there are usually gatherings that are held. First of all, the moon sighting that takes place, which is a public event, open air event that often happens in Cape Town. People go to view this to sort of commemorate or to celebrate the end of the fasting period. And then, of course, there are other events that take place, family gatherings, and there has been a lot of strain put on that, obviously, by the COVID-19 pandemic because of the timing of the waves that have happened in South Africa. But it looks like this time around, there might be a reprieve for the different religious groups in this regard.
Before we let you go, I'd like you to speak quickly on the changes related to international travel for people coming into South Africa and going out.
Absolutely. I thought this was quite an interesting development, considering, that travelers have actually been coming to South Africa. But the provision now has just been updated to say that travelers should either produce a proof of vaccination certificate. And that's similar to many of the provisions that we've been seeing in other countries. The other alternative is to produce a proof of a negative COVID-19 test. And the president also announced that travelers coming to South Africa will be offered an opportunity to get vaccinated. I think that might be something that could be taken up, particularly by other African travelers coming into the country, especially where the vaccination processes might be slow. It's not clear as yet as to whether those vaccinations will be free or whether there will be a cost added to that.
We'll definitely be coming back to you for more subsequently. For now, thank you very much, Dianne, for speaking with us.
Thank you.